Hey, folks, welcome back to Lincoln Square. Tonight, as every Tuesday night, we have the strategy session. I'm joined by my colleague and good friend, Joe Trippi. And Stuart Stevens is in transit tonight, back from a secret overseas mission. And we are joined by Ken Harbaugh of the Valor Media Network, good friend of the show, good friend of ours, a really terrific writer and veteran Navy pilot who now advocates for vets and who now hosts a number of podcasts on the Valor Network that we think are really, really valuable, and is got a Substack, the Ken Harbaugh Show Substack, where he goes into in-depth interviews with folks, especially because he has been to Ukraine many times, and he just I mean, you're practically just off the plane, Ken, right? So
amazing piece today.
Just such a good piece today. And folks, we know there are a million things exploding right now. We know that the economy and the shutdown are huge issues. We know that the Epstein files is still a huge issue. We know that Trump's ICE deportation hit squads are a huge issue. But it is a big world, and one of the most consequential things happening in that world outside of the direct American control is the war in Ukraine, because it will decide the future of Europe and thus the future of the world. And Ken, give us a read back on tell us about your piece today and why coming out of this trip you are more convinced than ever that Ukraine cannot lose this war.
Well, I didn't intend to write the piece that I wrote, but I had an incredible 6-hour drive, one of those 6-hour spans of time that changes your life because of a connection you make, a relationship you develop. It was with Andreii, a Ukrainian soldier who lost his leg above the knee. It was a bad injury, severely wounded during the counteroffensive back in 2023, barely made it off the battlefield, and was rehabilitated in part in the U.S. He spent some time getting his prosthesis fitted in the U.S., but was back in Ukraine to rejoin his unit as a drone pilot. And the thing about getting that kind of injury in Ukraine is it's your ticket out, right? You can spend the rest of the war, if you want, on the couch watching it on TV. They don't do that in Ukraine. They rejoin the fight out of love for their brothers, out of love for their country, out of love for freedom. And if you need any more evidence that Ukraine has the will to win, it's in people like Andreii, who head back to the front when they don't have to. Can I tell the story about his rescue? I don't want to.
Please, no. I really, you should, folks. You got to read the piece. It's amazing. But Ken, tell us the story.
So, we're 4 hours into the drive. I've gotten to know Andreii, right? In halting Ukrainian, and with his passable English, we develop a rapport. I meet his kids over a WhatsApp video, right? And eventually he opens up about the day he was wounded. His 16-man team had penetrated Russian lines, but had gotten trapped, mired in a minefield, and then surrounded by Russian forces, and were getting hit on all sides by artillery. Andreii lost his leg, had to put his tourniquet on, came over the radio, "No one's coming to get you. Fight to the last man, save one bullet for yourselves." And that happens a lot. And they were resigned to their fate, but through the smoke, a vehicle pulls up, and a man manhandles 5 survivors into this truck and gets them out of the minefield. And Andreii doesn't remember anything about this guy except that he was from a different battalion and that they called him Spaniard. And that triggered something in me, because I remembered an interview I had had a year earlier with a major in the 65th Battalion, 64th Battalion, whose nickname was Spaniard. And I didn't say anything, because what are the chances, right? In a million-plus man army, that I had met the same guy that Andreii's been looking for since the day he was wounded. When we stopped for gas, I pulled out. I'm going to get emotional here, because when I showed Andreii,
I got emotional reading it. I was like,
yeah, it's amazing.
When I showed Andreii this picture of me and Spaniard, he buckled, right? And he knelt down and he said, "That's the man who saved my life." And I couldn't believe it. And I immediately WhatsApped Spaniard's press officer, and I said, is Spaniard still alive? Like, is he
Right.
reachable? And they're planning a reunion now. Spaniard's at the
That's
front.
great.
He can't get off. He can't take a
Sure.
call, but he and Andrei are going to meet up. And man, I wish I could have a camera there, but I'm going to respect that reuniting. And I'll hear from Andrei about it, I'm sure.
Well, that to me, and again, folks, this article is just so powerful, and I really recommend it very, very highly. But it did tell the story, I think, in a way of the Russians are fighting for Putin's vanity and financial security and personal security, and the Ukrainians are fighting for the guy who pulls them out of the field.
Yeah.
They're fighting for their families. They're fighting for their cities.
Mhm.
They're fighting for their freedom. They're fighting for their lives. They're fighting for their country at a fundamental level. And it puts it a lot in perspective to me, because I was read that piece this morning and I was thinking about it and I was really moved by it. And I get asked, and Joe, I know you hear this a lot at Lincoln Project. People go, "What can I do? How can I fight? How can I resist this giant government that's so powerful and so badass and, you know, can do all these terrible things to me?" These people are up against, and I'm gonna get in trouble for saying this generation's Adolf Hitler. He's a genocidal madman who will kill everyone in his way.
Yeah.
And they get up every morning, and you know, I think we've got a picture that Joe took just before the war broke out.
Yeah.
And it really moved me at the time. Joe, tell us that story real quick.
Well, no, it was the same thing. I was there basically trying to help fend off Russian propaganda that was trying to influence the election away
Right.
from Zelensky's win. And I was, on the ground working every day with a bunch of very patriotic Ukrainians, and walked out on the Independence Square, Maiden Square, and there was this building with this huge "Freedom uh, is our religion," and it just it hit me, because it seemed like that was in the DNA of all these people I was working with. Knowing what was likely coming in the future after
Right.
Crimea. But I that day, it was like February 19th or something, I posted it and said, I think 4 or 5 days later, Putin invaded. But that was back when everybody thought he was going to be in Kiev in 4 days.
Right.
And I was like, no, he has no idea how hard these people will fight to stay out of his to keep their freedom and keep his
Right.
hands off Ukraine. And and that's why your piece, Ken, today just really it just tugged at me. I mean, it's such an amazing story, and of valor and courage, and of people who have something worth fighting for against what Putin's just cravenness.
Yeah. I hope they can be an inspiration to us as well. Like, I don't separate the two. Rick, I think you
Right.
opened beautifully, like, it world, but Ukraine isn't on the other side of the world in spirit, right? It
No.
is,
No.
the fascist tide is rising, and the front line might be in Ukraine right now. But it's going to take all of us to stem the tide. Ukraine just happens to be in a kinetic fight, but we're fighting it as well, and they get that. The other
Yeah.
thing, and you both appreciate this, I'm sure, as political strategists, Ukrainians know more about American politics
Oh yeah.
because of the existential stake
Yeah.
than the vast majority of
Oh,
Americans.
by
Probably
far.
the vast majority of
Absolutely.
like American political cognoscenti. Like, Ukrainians have to understand what's going on, and they
Yeah.
understand the rise of fascism globally.
Yeah. And it is something, folks. And again, we led with Ukraine tonight because it really is an example of people who are fighting to be free. And we face an internal threat, they face an external threat, but those two threats, the internal threat we have of Trump and of Miller and authoritarianism and all that here, that threat is a kindred spirit with Vladimir Putin. They do not believe in human liberty. They do not believe in human freedom. They do not believe in law or justice or democracy. And so that's why Ukraine has moved me personally so much since the very beginning of this whole conflict. And I want to ask you both, the tools that Ukraine has had to use, and I want to loop this back on why Americans need to be creative about what they're afraid of and what they shouldn't be afraid of in America. The tools Ukrainians have had to use, they never would have or couldn't build enough tanks to rival Russia. They don't have enough men and women on the battlefield to rival Russia. They didn't have enough fighter planes to rival Russia. But they MacGyvered the shit out of this war. They innovated on every different level.
It's the first army to defeat a navy.
Yeah.
With no ships, nothing.
Right, with no ships. But the drones, Ken, tell us a little bit about how much they use drone warfare, because I think Americans think about it, they get it, but they don't get it, how central it is to their victory.
Well, Americans don't get it. I don't think the American military gets it.
Oh, I know the
which
American
is-
military doesn't get it.
Which is especially alarming, because if we don't learn from what Ukraine is doing right now, we're going to get our asses kicked in our next war.
Oh, yeah.
Ukraine is defining the future of warfare. I was there during Operation Spiderweb several months ago, which was Ukraine's masterstroke, taking out up to a third of Putin's strategic surveillance aircraft by positioning these drones within striking distance of these airfields. Obviously, none of us knew that was going down, but in response, Putin unleashed a wave. At that point, the largest barrage in the war to date of attacks against cities and all along the front line. I was at the front line at the time in a bunker with a kamikaze drone team, and we got pinned down for 20 hours. It was supposed to be a 3-hour embed, a milk run. I was going in, taking some photos, interviewing some folks, and heading out. 20 hours into it, we're like, is this ever going to end? But the innovation that their innovation cycle, this is how it's described in DOD white papers. Innovation cycles in the US take years, sometimes decades. They take days in Ukraine, days. I went to a Willy Wonka-esque drone factory where they were printing parts for tomorrow's warheads because the targets had changed. They were now prioritizing infantry, and so they needed a new kind of warhead, and they were able to change them on the spot with 3D printers to force or to stall what they thought might be a massed infantry attack along the front. Their innovation cycle is stunningly fast. The thing that left the biggest impression on me, I don't know if it's as tactically significant, but you'll appreciate why this kind of experience sticks with you, is their SIGINT teams, signals intelligence. Rick, interpret for me if I go all Navy on folks, right? Their signals intelligence teams are able to intercept the electronic feed going from the drone back to the Russian operator. And so we were able to see literally what the Russian pilot of this suicide drone is seeing. And every time that camera panned across our position, I'm like, can we go R-rated here?
Sure.
Okay. I'm like, holy shit. I asked the commander next to me, is that our position? And is that right now? And he's like, yes and yes. Right? We could see literally what the Russian pilots are seeing as they are trying to find us. And that leaves an impression on you, right? The Ukrainians I was with, their sense of humor in moments like that is another thing that convinced me that they're going to win this war. They are just so unbelievably cool under pressure. And every time that Russian camera zoomed in on our position, they're like laughing and waving it across the street to their buddy's position, like, hit those guys, they're assholes. And it's just that kind of black humor in a unit that has the edge in morale. And look, life is not easy in the Ukrainian trenches, but I promise you it's worse in the Russian trenches.
That is widely been reported that Russian morale, being sent to the front now in Russia, is a death sentence almost universally. And they are terrified that Putin doesn't have a solution for this. And he doesn't. He really does not have. I mean, especially now. And let's talk a little bit about how Ukraine is now strategically dismantling Russia's economy and winter is coming in Russia, and it's not going to be pretty, is it?
No, I mean, oil refining capacity is down 17% because of Ukrainian deep strikes. That's over a million barrels a day. $250 billion in capital has left the country. The ruble continues to slide. They just canceled their Russian Arab summit because the only two Arab leaders who agreed to attend were like, I don't know, Iran, and I can't remember who else. They are becoming increasingly isolated while Ukraine is inventing by the day new ways to bleed Russia's war machine. Russia is not winning this war.
Right. That sign, folks, is net benzina, no gas. So they've struck all the refineries that are in immediate range of Ukrainian drones. And the range of the Ukrainian drones is getting longer all the time, folks, because they're now building their own homemade cruise missiles.
Yep.
They're now getting cruise missiles from Europe, and the Europeans are like, fuck it, let's go. So guys, I want to shift topics a little bit, because right now the shutdown in America is a big deal. And our military is right now going through a really agonizing reappraisal of what it means to be in our military, because I guess you were probably still in Ukraine. I don't know if you got a chance to see Pete Hegseth's masterful speech to the troops, but and by masterful I mean absurd. You know, we are right now in a position where our military seems to like it's being stressed in ways that it hasn't been before. They're being called on to do domestic law enforcement. They're being called on now to be in the streets of our cities for a political mission for Trump. They're being screwed by this shutdown. They're getting their leadership at the Pentagon is clownishly fascist. Talk to me as a vet and as somebody who's observed this pretty closely, what your take is on where our military is at this moment in terms of morale and the internal sort of understanding of what their position in American life should be.
Yeah. I used to have a lot of faith in the senior leadership of the military, the uniformed leadership within the Pentagon, to hold the line and to remember that their oaths are not to an individual, they are to the Constitution, to support and defend it against all enemies, foreign and domestic. I don't know that we can have that degree of confidence anymore. There isn't a Milley in the Pentagon anymore, and Trump has made sure that there isn't, to get rid of anyone who would say no. And make no mistake, if not for Milley, the 82nd Airborne would have been in Washington, D.C. during Trump's first term. It was a handful of uniformed officers who stopped that kind of thing, who said, I will not transmit the order to invoke the Insurrection Act. Those officers are now gone, which leaves us with the question, which we should never have to ask, who is going to hold the line? I fear it may come down to the mid-grade officers on that riot line in the National Guard unit being deployed into Chicago or Memphis or wherever, having to choose between obeying an order, an illegal order from the commander-in-chief, or honoring their oath to the Constitution. That is just an incredibly difficult position to put those young men and women in. And it represents a dramatic failure of the Department of Defense, civilian and military leadership. Where are the generals right now, right? They need to be speaking out when Trump is at Annapolis, slamming Democrats, when Hegseth is using his office to score political points, and they're not doing it. And it's going to come down to, I fear, the captains and the majors and the colonels to be that last guard, that last line of defense.
I in the first Trump administration, there were plenty of flag officers who were like, I'm not going over that line. But one truth about flag officers is they are ambitious, and they sniff the wind a little bit, and a lot of them, not all, but a lot of them are quietly thinking, well, if so-and-so says no, I can step up. Because, and him promoting Kane from Major General into being the chairman of the Joint Chiefs, holy shit, did that set people off. That was a signal, I can uplift anybody. I can make my horse a senator, the sort of Nero thing.
Yeah.
But I think it is something that, and Joe, you've got a lot of experience in places where, we're watching this play out in the streets. Talk to me about where you see the politics of the military playing out in the minds of Americans who not the ones who are watching MAGA TV thinking, oh my God, that's Antifa's at war with our military, which it's not.
It's clearly they get this is un-American. I mean, that's starting to really seep into the numbers when you look at it. I think that the interesting thing is it's not. I'm more, I'm not sure that I'm talking about privates and just sergeants. I mean, just those guys. Even if they got the order, I'm not. I mean, it's an order, and I get it, but I just don't know that even they. I mean, when and obviously the National Guard is different because they're civilians most days of the week, and then go do their work on weekends. But when I was at Union Station in Washington talking to a few of the National Guard folks. These are not folks that are gonna follow those orders. I mean, they're us. They're part of us, and I think that gives me some hope that if enough Americans are energized and engaged and organized, and that order and then you got Stephen Miller too, who is clearly chomping at the bit to invoke the Insurrection Act or plenary power, whatever
whatever fantasy he's running this week.
Yeah. But I don't, so I think they want to do it. There's no doubt in my mind. It's obviously what the Hexeth and Trump Pentagon thing, Quantico thing was all about. Hey guys, we're going domestic now, and you're in, or go do the honorable thing and resign. It was clear that's what was going on, but I think most Americans watched that and were troubled by it. I mean, I think that's starting to show up now. Who knows what the next distraction will be before they. Again, I personally, I think part of this, I'm not sure the Insurrection Act is going to be used that way. I think it's much more likely for the possibility to be in 2026, ICE out there. Defending ballot boxes and not defending ballot boxes, but saying they're looking for illegal votes and making sure that the illegal migrants are arrested if they try to vote and that kind of stuff. And whether that's where I think it may be is sort of somehow to disrupt the election, but I hope it doesn't. And I have a lot of faith in the rank and file. That those orders all the way down are going to be a bunch of confused people going not following them directly. Put it that way. I hope. But can you
Go ahead.
I think I have a lot of faith in the rank and file. I have a ton of faith in the culture of the military and its centuries-long tradition of fidelity to the Constitution, which is not shared by ICE, right? Those guys might swear an oath, but anybody who's joining ICE in the last 2 weeks, right, is not joining for the oath. They're joining to beat people up and to pay off
That's what I'm more worried
their
about.
Pickup truck loan. But I think one of the really devious things that this administration is doing is trying to conflate the National Guard and ICE, putting them on deployments together, making them look the same, trying to get the American people to turn against both. Because if that happens, that's a Rubicon, right?
Ken, that's a really good point.
Yeah,
is that they're trying to conflate ICE, and just so everybody's very clear, these guys can be tactical dipshits all they want and wear their 511s, and they can get their body armor, from Cabela's and all this other crap. They are not trained soldiers. And you can see it in how they behave toward American citizens. And it really is something that differentiation. You're right. That's, I think, is exactly right. They're trying to show these two things together all the time.
Mm-hmm.
I say it's all part of the overall domestic security force of the country. That ain't it, folks.
Yeah.
So, guys, as we're starting to come up on the time here, I want to talk a little bit more about Ukraine. Just jump back over to that for 1 minute. So, Ken, you have made repeated trips over to Ukraine to help bring aid and vehicles and everything else. Talk to us about that work that you've been doing.
Yeah. So the way in for me, I mean, I go to help tell the story. I go to visit my, brothers in arms who I've gotten to know well. I tend to embed with the same unit again and again when I go, but you don't want to go empty-handed, right? So I'm usually in a convoy driving an ambulance or another kind of vehicle that is desperately needed at the front. In the case of ambulances, we're delivering them mostly to frontline units. The average lifespan of an ambulance at the front line in Ukraine
Oh,
is
shit.
11 days. 11 days because they are targeted. We
Yeah.
paint them black. We try to make them look not like ambulances, just the opposite of like Geneva Convention protocols in World War II. If you had a red cross on a white vehicle in World War II, you tended to be safer than the jeeps and the tanks, right?
Yeah.
It's just the opposite.
Yeah.
With
Right.
Putin's army, they target ambulances because of the effect they know it will have on the morale of soldiers.
Right.
So they last about 11 days. They need a lot of ambulances. That's sort of the way we get into the country, and then I usually head south or east and try to find out what's actually going on at the zero line.
Right. And the zero line. Let's bring up the map for a second, folks. If we've got that. I think we've got that. So Eastern Ukraine, y'all, is where this entire mess has been grinding since 2014, when the Russians took Crimea.
Yeah.
And it is interesting to me, Ken, that we are now several years into this war, and Russia is kind of where it was 3 years ago.
Yeah.
In terms of the territory it manages to have effective control over. Ukraine can't quite seem to push them out. Russia can't quite seem to push forward. It's got a kind of World War I vibe to it in some ways, with World War I trenches warfare with drones. All those provinces that Russia tries to pretend are parts of Russia, they're being damaged more by Russia than by Ukraine. I mean, they have reduced Kherson to rubble. Talk to us a little bit about the extent of the civilian targeting that, and by the way, civilian targeting is what the Russians have done throughout Ukraine from the whole war. But talk to us about how much damage the civilian populations that Russia claims to want to save have taken in these provinces.
Yeah, it's horrific, and they're doing it intentionally. It's not collateral damage. They are targeting civilians. In Kherson, the Russian drone pilots refer to their missions as human safaris. They brag about them. They post the videos online of them dropping bomblets, or sometimes with the FPV drones, the first person view drones, you actually see the drone fly into the target. And they're flying into old ladies carrying shopping bags, old men on bicycles. And they do it to terrorize, in the case of Kherson, the people who have stayed behind to try to bring their city back. Kherson, of course, was it was the first major city occupied. They were driven back out. The Russians were driven out on November 11th, Liberation Day, but they hold the left bank of the Dnipro River. And every day they launch drones across to terrorize the free Ukrainians on the right bank. When I was there several months ago, I was appalled at the stats that the Russians were launching 30 suicide drones a day into Kherson to terrorize its population. Last week, I got an update. It's 200 drones a day. 200 drones a day flying across the Dnipro to terrorize the civilians in Kherson. And look, that is absolutely a terror tactic. It also has a tactical rationale, which is that it forces Ukrainian soldiers to take enormous risks to protect civilians. I did a foot patrol with I mean, it's going to sound unbelievable just describing it without like photos, but there are Ukrainian soldiers, the best shooters in the army, who go out on a foot patrol along the river to intercept the drones before they can get into the city. And they have to shoot them down by sight, because most of these drones now are fiber optic. You can't pick
Yep.
up a fiber optic
You
drone
can't
that's
jam 'em.
trailing a wire, right?
Right.
Can't jam it. You can't detect it. So we're walking along streets, heads on swivels, looking for drones, listening for drones in the sky, heading across the river towards the city center. And when you pick up a drone, you just open up on it. And these guys are shooting rifles, right? They're shooting rifles at pigeon-sized drones 100 meters away, because a shotgun is not going to kill it far away enough.
Right.
If you're using shotguns like Americans think you should, it's amazing how many people have advice for these guys online, right? If you're using shotgun,
Yeah. I'm sure.
it's going to enter its kill radius before you get it. And just watching these guys work is the most humbling thing as a former military guy that I have ever experienced. I will also add, Kherson's trees are not nearly big enough, because the only guidance I got was, when we start shooting, hide behind a tree. I'm like, I am not fitting behind this tree. So I'll share some video with you eventually, but bravest human beings
Yeah.
in the history of the planet.
Joe?
Absolutely. No, like I said, you saw it before it even broke out. But that's what that's why he can't win. I mean, I agree with you, Ken. He can't win. But even if you waved a wand and he somehow won tomorrow, the amount of terror that he created. I mean, it would be, nothing would be safe, because of the very guys you're talking about out there with those guns shooting down the drones, and they'd invent other ways to fight back forever. I mean, it's just not. This is not something he can win. It's so clear.
No occupying Russian would ever sleep a whole night.
When this war is over, let's talk about the resistance in the occupied territories. That is an unbelievable story, which can't be told now, but it's extraordinary.
So I think we've got an interview that Stuart did with you. Do we have a clip of that before we go?
We're on the shore of the Black Sea here in Odessa, Ukraine. The Shahed drones leave Crimea, they fly over the Black Sea, and they target civilian neighborhoods. Our mobile air defense crew is on the hill overlooking the beach here, waiting for the waves of Shaheds to come in over the water. At that point, they'll engage, guide their tracer rounds into the sheds, and fingers crossed, down them before they hit apartment buildings, hospitals, playgrounds across the city.
So the Shahed drones, folks, were designed by Iran. They're now manufactured in Russia. I guess they're still mostly manufactured in Russia with Chinese parts. The Chinese are a big supply line for the Russians here in this whole game. So I just a Ukraine war nerd question. They're coming out of Crimea. Why the fuck have they not knocked down the Kerch Bridge yet?
The Kerch Bridge is solid concrete. Look,
I know it's a hard target. I know it's a hard target.
And they have hit it so many times. I mean, Operation Spiderweb actually included a simultaneous attack, a submarine drone attack on the Kerch Bridge. The Russians have reinforced that like probably no other target in the history of warfare. It is a really, really tough target, and they are trying to knock it out.
I had a retired French Air Force pilot who's a follower of mine on Twitter, DMs me and he signals me. He goes, "We used to practice dropping an anti-runway munition called the Durandal, which was this thing that dumped like 400 runway penetrators out of the bottom of the Mirage." And he's like, "You've got to tell somebody to use this on the Kerch Bridge." I'm like, okay, to the degree I have any kind of influence in that regard and a spare supply of Durandals, I will, I'll put that out there. Well, folks, a little different show tonight, but I think it was a really important one. I want to thank you so much for coming on, Ken. Thank you, Joe, as always. We'll see you guys again next week. Be sure to listen to That Trippy Show. Check out Ken Harbaugh's amazing interviews and written pieces from this trip. Really quite something. And I really want to encourage everybody this weekend.
Yep.
Remember, in the words of our founders, no fucking kings. Get out there and do an event this weekend. I'm planning to. I hope you will too. You need to be out on the streets. We need to increasingly mobilize in this country to let them have a signal, a very clear, abundantly sharp, clear signal that they do not get to treat Americans like serfs, like peasants, like victims. They do not get to treat Americans as Putin would like to treat Ukrainians and treats his own people right now. So, all right, folks, we'll see you again next time. Appreciate y'all for listening. Tune in on our YouTube channel. Do me a big favor. Go like, subscribe, do all that stuff. You know the drill. And you can also follow me on the Lincoln Project podcast, the Enemies List podcast, the Elephant in the Room every Friday, the Breakdown Thursday nights, and Behind the Numbers with the Wilsons on Fridays. Listen to that Trippy show with Joe Trippy. Check out the Valor Network with Ken Harbaugh. We will see you all again next time. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks all. Thanks, Ken.
Thanks, Ken.